It has been a while. It's been a while since we've all been in the same room podcasting.
Yeah, man. Been a long time.
I know. Crazy couple of years.
Yeah.
But due to popular demand, we're back. We're back in studio. It feels good. We probably could have done podcasts over the whole time, but we did a couple like via Zoom, and it just didn't have the same feel. And
It wasn't fun.
It's not the same. Yeah.
But it's good to see you guys.
Yeah.
Hal, have you grown like 2 foot in the last 2 years?
Yeah, but only
Sideways.
Hal's got abs now.
What's that supposed to mean?
I don't know.
Finally getting a man's body.
You're on 14 now. It's about time.
Yeah. We're going to take a look at the topic today of should I train to failure? And it's a bit of a contentious topic. It's some people think no, some people think yes. It is dependent on a number of factors.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't even know what training to failure actually means. You know?
No, tell us what it means.
Well, it means training until you fail, until you can't do anymore.
So there are a number of sort of things to look at when training to failure. I think you take a look at what your goal is, whether you are training for a sport, whether you are just training to gain size or training to lose weight. I think it's important. You guys come from we all do. We come from sporting backgrounds. When you train, Hal, do you have more of a bodybuilding style program, or are you training specifically for basketball?
Both. Basketball outside of the gym, but in the gym, unless I'm doing legs and specifically plyo, it's still mostly bodybuilding style exercises.
Yeah.
So chest press, squatting, shoulder press, etc.
Yeah. So now you're about to we've got big news coming soon for Musashi on sport-specific programs, and you're about to kick into a sport-specific basketball program.
I am.
I think for athletes, like when it comes to a sport, when you're playing a game on the weekend or midweek or whatever, I'm not a fan of training to failure, because I think you're
well, it always comes back to the goals, right?
Yeah.
Whatever you're trying to achieve, training to failure can have, a role to play. If you're trying to grow muscles, that's probably the main part where training to failure can have a benefit.
What do you think is the most appropriate context to train to failure then?
Well, let me give you an example, right? So the most appropriate context for training to failure is most guys that enter a gym will train to failure in the first few days in the gym, or probably even the first year. They'll just keep smashing it out. Most young guys do this. It's just like natural, right?
And it's every set and it's every exercise.
Exactly. So personally, I never train to failure anymore.
Yeah, coming from a powerlifting background, it depends what sort of part of the program you're up to, but you're rarely training to failure in a powerlifting program.
Okay, I'll give you a quiz.
I don't know.
All right.
Is it multiple choice?
What do you think gives the most induces the most fatigue on your body, right? Training with very heavy loads, training with moderate loads, training with light loads, or training with very light loads?
Very light and super high rep.
I think it depends on the rep range and what your body's accustomed to. That's probably not the...
Surely you can assume if you're doing high weight, you're doing lower reps, and if you're doing low weight, you're doing high reps. So on that assumption, I'd definitely go the lighter.
Assume
the
the training volume is similar.
Training volume is similar? Yep. What would put the most stress on you? I would say heavier weight.
Contrary to popular belief, it's actually the very light weights that induce the greatest amount of fatigue over moderate weights and light weights. Heavyweights do, induce a large part of fatigue as well. But
so lighter weights are creating more fatigue than sort of medium.
Yeah,
with the same amount of reps.
With the same amount of reps and volume.
Well, not the same amount of reps. Obviously, you're doing a lot more reps, right? I'm talking about...
You led us down the wrong track.
Well, I didn't say reps. I said volume, right? So, your total training volume of, the total amount that you're
I would agree with that then.
Yeah. So
because generally, when you're lifting lighter weights, you're doing a higher volume. You're doing more reps, and that would put more fatigue on the joints, more fatigue on the muscles,
and more fatigue on your central nervous system and your as well. So what happens when you're training with light weights generally is your muscles get full of these metabolic products like calcium ions and things, and then this failure to contraction actually induces like a much larger type of fatigue. Whereas if you're training with pretty heavy weights, generally your form is gonna break down before you're gonna get to that stage. You know?
Yeah, I think most people listening are going to go, well, how does this apply to me? So let's talk like team sport. And you're playing. You could probably break team sport training down into off season, pre-season, during season. So off season, let's talk specifically off season. Training to failure.
Yeah, well, see, a lot of people do, a lot of strength training and things in the off season. So, typically it's good to have a good structured program that you're not over fatiguing yourself, because, you don't want to spend too much time recovering. You want to get this fine balance of getting the right amount of training stimulus, but also, allowing your body to recover enough to continue training efficiently throughout the week. Yeah,
and look, I'd say in the off season, that's when sports people are probably doing their least amount of sport specific activity. They're generally not. Let's take basketball for an example. They might be shooting hoops socially in the off season, but they're focusing on strength and their power and
general fitness.
General fitness. So I think off season, I think it is generally safe to go to failure a bit, and especially if you're trying to put on size.
Yeah. If hypertrophy is your goal, right? Building muscle, that's where training to failure is better than not training to failure, right? And that's why you see bodybuilders doing that, because they can handle that kind of fatigue. They don't really have those, performance requirements that other athletes do have.
Yeah. And Hal makes a good point. Like, what is failure? Failure is to the point where you cannot do one more rep. So if you've got 1 to 2 more reps in the bank, that's not training to failure.
Yeah.
And I generally pull up 1 to 2 reps short on everything. Only, where's your mind going?
I don't know.
I can see you smiling at me.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to go there.
I couldn't even think of anything dirty, to be honest.
Because when I feel like when I am pushing it to that point of failure on every single set, I might use one exercise where I go to failure, and the rest are sort of I'm pulling up sort of maybe 2 to 3 reps short.
It's almost nice to do that on a compound set to begin with, and everything else is almost supplementary.
Yeah. And if you are going to that point of failure time and time again, set after set, and then you're trying to back up and play basketball on the weekend or a night or whatever, you're not going to perform at your best for your sport.
You're not only going to affect your performance and your recovery, you're also going to increase your risk of injury, right? If you're training under this fatigue conditions, you're much more likely to have poor form and to create an injury or an injury creating environment.
Would you say if you're training to failure, it's better to do so at the end of a set with lower weight, so you can actually focus more on form? And how you can do like just a drop set in general, I guess.
Yeah, the old burner set at the end.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that in general. But if you're doing a large amount of sets until failure, it's going to impact your overall training. Right?
And that's where I think the importance of like a periodized program comes into play. Like you need to have a specific goal, and you need to be working to that goal within that block of training period.
Yeah.
So it could be off season, you're looking to put on size. Pre-season, you might start working on power and explosivity, and then during the season might be more agility and conditioning. So that you're working to specific goals with specific purposes, and at certain points within those programs you might incorporate some training to fatigue, but less so sort of pre-season and during season.
I like training to failure when you're incorporating cardio as well. So if you do a regular, bodybuilding style session and then finishing on the bike, on the rowing machine, I really like training to failure in that sense. So you go home just exhausted.
Yeah, well, and that's a good point that you bring up. I think training to failure when you're looking at conditioning is very different to training to failure when you're looking at resistance training.
Yeah, but resistance training is kind of easy to measure, easy to track, and on your point of programming, it is pretty important, right? So, I'll give you an example. Say you try and do 10 reps on the bench press, and like 10 is your absolute max, right? You're not really going to be able to bench that much for the rest of the week. Well, at least the next few days, right? So, maybe later in the week, you might be able to do 10 again. But in general, your recovery is going to be more, you're going to need more recovery, more, you're going to suffer more fatigue.
Yeah, and I think, look, if you're listening to this and you're sort of just purely a gym rat bodybuilder who wants to put on size, I think that's where the split program came into play, where you're focusing on certain muscle groups on a day, so that you can sort of really fatigue that muscle group, because you might not hit it again for another 4 or 5 7 days. So it does allow you to go a bit more to failure than a normal sort of full body program that you might be hitting multiple times a week.
Well, if you have a well-designed program, instead of training to failure on that one day and not being able to train correctly for the rest of the week, maybe you do 5 sets of 5 on that day and you do 5 sets of 5 later in the week. If you comparing that, say you do, 2 sets of 10 till failure versus 5 sets of 5, that's 25 reps versus 20 reps. But then, you actually, if you're able to do it twice a week, you're doing 50 reps, right? So, at the end of the year, you're doing twice as many reps without that same, compromisation of your performance.
Yeah, it's a good point. If you do have a structured program that allows you to get the same volume, but maybe having more rest in between sets, there's more sets but less reps. So you're not taking every set to failure, but you might be doing more sets in total. So the volume sort of evens out. That can work as well. There's different methods. A lot of this is like really hard to figure out for yourself, right? And there's conflicting sort of research and information everywhere. I just want to announce, like, quickly, we have taken a lot of this thought process and research out of it for the listeners. In March, believe middle of March, we're actually releasing sport-specific programs across 7 different sports. And each program will be phased off-season, pre-season, during season. And we'll also have matching nutrition programs for each of those sports for off-season, during season, and pre-season.
We'll be going to them a bit deeper in the next episode. We'll be introducing one of our new ambassadors as well, Coach Tom.
Yeah, we've brought on board a coach, a strength and conditioning coach, accredited coach. He's also an accredited nutritionist. So we'll be working with him to develop all of these programs. We're having sort of video instructional, so it takes all the thought out of it for you guys.
Yeah, Coach Tom's good.
Coach Tom's good, and we've also brought on board we've been working with a sports dietitian for a number of years, Gwen, who has worked with a number of high-level athletes, and so has Coach Tom, and she's written all the nutrition programs. So we're pretty excited to bring that to you guys and take all the thought out of it for you.
Yeah.
Back to sort of COVID training. How did it affect your training?
Yeah, it wasn't too bad. I've got.
You sent us a few kettlebell workouts that you were doing at home.
Yeah, pretty good at my kettlebell party tricks now. So also been trying to do a little bit of calisthenics.
Nice.
Trying to get these planche push-ups.
Has it changed your training or the way you're looking at your training?
Well, kind of aligned with the tapering off of my powerlifting.
So that's it for you? No more powerlifting comps for now?
I'm powerlifter till I die, but no, there's not really many comps on at the moment or anything. So I've just been mixing it up a bit, which is kind of refreshing.
Yeah, so a bit of powerlifting, bit of kettlebell stuff, bit of calisthenics, bit of sprinting.
Yeah.
You're a bit of an all-rounder.
Always sprinting.
You're like an athlete these days, like an all-round athlete.
He is an athlete.
Train like an athlete.
What about you, Hal? What changed over COVID time? You just didn't train at all? You just put on sat at home? No.
I started doing intermittent fasting, which I really enjoyed, and I switched up pretty much all my bodybuilder style exercising for bodyweight stuff, so mostly chin-ups, push-ups, etc., and then doing a form of sprinting 2 or 3 times a week.
And are you back in the gym now?
I'm back in the gym now. I've applied a lot of that plyometric training to my training program, except for maybe upper body stuff.
Yep.
Although I'm doing a hell of a lot more chin-ups and pull-ups.
Yep.
Sprinting in general, just fell back in love with that again, and it's shown some results on the basketball court as well. I feel a lot fitter.
Yeah, nice. And both of you, when you had time off, how was the first session back in the gym? Were you guys feeling weak, or you a lot of what you were doing transferred and it was fine?
The first session was okay. The couple of days after that were a bit rough.
Really?
Yes, I agree.
Was that from a recovery perspective?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're just not adapted to it, not conditioned to it. So.
I was sore. Oh my god, my chest. Like when you're showering and trying to get under the pits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just so sore.
What about you?
Well,
survived without jiu-jitsu?
Well, there may have been a few sneaky jiu-jitsu sessions, that's for sure. But for me, it wasn't as applicable. I've got the home garage gym set up, so.
That looks,
But I've been doing, like, traditionally, I've sort of come from that bodybuilding background who moved into sports, and a lot of my programming has been bodybuilding based. But now I'm starting to incorporate a lot more sport specific stuff for jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
But I encourage everyone to sort of to trial different methods of training. Again, check out our programs when they come out in March, and you don't always have to train to failure.
Yeah, and even sprints that you mentioned, Hal, that's a good example. If imagine sprinting to failure, like just imagine what your recovery would be like.
You get hurt almost every time.
Exactly. So if you're sprinting 50 meters at a time, it's probably the easiest way to visualize the impact of training to failure on your performance.
It's much better doing like a few slow laps after and then going that until you really can't go any further.
Yeah, and then there's also this awesome life hack that's come out for the gym. It's not really a life hack, but it's called autoregulation, right? RPE, rate of perceived exertion. So there's some programs which include that rather than saying doing 3 sets of 10 or whatever. And my favorite autoregulation is reps in reserve, right? You can measure in your head. It's probably the easiest way to measure how many reps you have in reserve. So instead of saying do 3 sets of 8, do 3 sets with 2 reps in reserve, right? So you can generally make that call every set, and that's probably a good way to ensure that you're not training to failure.
Yeah, I would encourage more people do not train to failure.
Yeah.
And if you are, make sure your nutrition and recovery methods are on point.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Anything else to add before we jump off? Nice quick one today to intro back into our podcast world.
Yeah, we didn't want to do the podcast to failure today, so we're just using it.
I like the way you tied that back in.
No.
Even better than your Miyamoto Musashi quotes.
Oh, I don't even have a Musashi quote.
We don't have time for one anyway.
Ready for today. But
everyone jump on Musashi.com for more sort of training and nutrition advice. Stay tuned. In March, we'll be releasing all those sport-specific programs. And thanks for listening, and welcome back to the Musashi podcast.
That's it. Musashi out.